been
Uh-huh.
really observing the clinical response about the past 2 years. And it's very interesting when we start talking about our understanding of long COVID in the past 2+ years now has evolved with not only our research, but many other groups coming in. I think sort of the understanding is there is a vascular inflammation taking place, and subsequently, a multiple different factors are now taking place. And so it's not this magic. There's no one magic pill. There's no one
Right.
explanation for the pathology of post or long COVID, and we really come to really understand that now.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is Dr. Ryan Cole, who's the pathologist that has been reporting on so many of the spike protein effects in pathology specimens. And I told him, I said, look, the way I've experienced this clinically, I think of it as an endotheliitis. And he said that is exactly what we're seeing pathologically. And when you say it's vascular inflammatory, I really do believe that it is somehow injuring the integrity of the endothelium, that in interaction with the macrophages and activation of cytokines, that's where you're getting this inflammatory process.
Absolutely, and those findings are now being corroborated and published by multiple groups around the world. So I
Yeah.
think there's sort of a growing consensus. But what's interesting is sort of still what is causing the pathology, what is driving it? Is it the spike protein? Is it the monocytes? Is it the combination, or quite frankly something else that's taking place here? So I think we're sort of
Right.
starting to get
Yeah.
our minds around that and a good handle of who is going to respond to certain medications and who are not.
And you're treating long COVID from vaccine injury and from the virus itself, and probably from both.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, so we didn't, we never set out to look at patients having vax issues, but one of the things is when we started looking into patients with post-COVID or long COVID, we started hearing from patients coming and saying, "Look, we got one of these COVID vaccines, and we're having a persistent reaction." We're told about a week or two is expected, but these are patients now experiencing 3 months, 6 months, and then
Yeah.
subsequently 2 years now. They've been suffering.
Yeah.
We're really starting to look into that.
Yeah. Okay. So with that as the preamble, I'm going to I'm going to have you step out for a second, and I'm going to bring in my friend Howard. He will just now be known as Howard, but I've known him for many years. He was an extremely active television and movie writer, producer, director, showrunner, and a prolific novelist who some time ago got a vaccine and had such a nasty reaction. It upset me so much I stopped calling him because I felt responsible as a medical provider. But let's bring in Howard. Howard, thanks for coming in and tell your story.
Sure, Drew. First you ghost me and then you want me on your show. So
I know. Well, that's how I work with all my friends now. If you're going to spend time with me, it's going to be on the streaming program. So, but
that's
it's
great.
good. It's good to look.
So
It's good to see you smiling and laughing because when you first had this thing, you were not sounding that way. So
yeah, no, and now it's my way of dealing with everything ultimately is to find ways to laugh at it. I wasn't angry then. Now I'm angry. Actually, we can get to that later. You were the angry one. Um,
interesting.
but so
Interesting.
so the pre-story here is that my neurotic way of dealing with the pandemic was to get into the very best shape of my life. Every single morning I walked for an hour, and then in the afternoon I did 20 minutes of strength, and then another hour on the stationary bike. And even lost that 10 pounds that we all always want to lose. I mean, I just thought if this thing hits me, because I have asthma, not terrible, but enough that, even if I had a cold, it would turn into an opera. And I just, wanted to be in the best shape to fight this off. I want to say a couple of things because now I feel like I'm here with the Pirates today. So I sort of want to just put my own bona fides out there. I'm not an anti-vax person. I've never been. I until now when I can't. I got a flu shot every year. They were extremely beneficial to me. I'll even put out there, I voted for Joe Biden. I sent money to Joe Biden. I'm There's nothing.
Yeah.
I'm even not anti-COVID
And Howard,
vaccine at this point.
you're living in the digital world where it's impossible to make anybody happy. So
That's right.
I am certainly
I know
not
I've just
anti-vax.
alienated people.
I still continue to vaccinate my elderly patients. I continue to prescribe Paxlovid, and for that, most of the people that listen to this podcast, this stream, cannot forgive me. They're furious with me that I haven't forsaken this, and I've had a lot of experience with patients like you, and yet I still see the net benefit in the elderly patients. I'm less clear in a 30-year-old male and myocarditis and other things kick in. I just want to get it right. And I think people have to understand the spectrum of what I think about when I worry about vaccine reactions. I worry about stuff like you. So keep going. You're in good company.
Okay. So, when the vaccine came out, I right away, as soon as we were able to get it, we got our first 2 doses of Moderna. The first one, all I had was a sore arm. Second one, I had one very, very bad day, fever, chills. It knew every place in my body I'd ever had a problem. If I'd had a surgery, I'd had pains there. I had a badly sprained ankle like 15 years ago. All of a sudden, that was hurting. It was wild. And then the strangest thing was these powerful, very brief headaches, like spikes through my head. Like, it was incredibly painful for a second or two, and then they'd go away with no after pain or anything. And then the next morning, I felt healthier than I ever did in my life. I went out for my walk. I said, this is great. I never had anything come on and go that quickly. So then they started telling us that they were wearing off quicker than they hoped, and people should get boosted. And as soon as we were eligible for the boosters, that one bad day did not, and this becomes important in the story later and how I've evolved on this a little bit. That one bad day didn't dissuade me at all from getting it again. The messaging all was very, very clear, and it's still out there now. If you have a bad short-term reaction, that's a good thing. That means it's working. That means it's creating antibodies.
You know what?
And so
I had forgotten that piece of the story, Howard. But now that you bring it up, I remember that vividly. That we were saying that's your immune response. That is you getting this robust reaction, and now you need to do it again.
Yeah, and that's still there, by the way. If you go on the CDC website, I mean, that's still the messaging that's out there. So then I went, probably whatever it was, 6-8 months later, that we were eligible to get the booster. First week in December, went and did that as soon as we were able to. The pharmacist said, whatever you had to the second, whatever your reaction to the second one was, that's probably what you're going to get this time. That seems to be what everybody has. So my wife, who only had a sore arm, I had the same one terrible day. Next morning, I go out for my walk. I get about 2 blocks in and go, something's not right here. There just wasn't the right energy in my legs. I just was feeling tired. And I walked about 15 minutes to the coffee shop where I often work. And I sort of rested there for an hour and then managed to get myself home. And then from there, it just sort of kept getting a little worse, a little worse. One thing that I usually forget to describe, that feeling you get when you're about to get sick, or maybe you don't, where you have that day where it's like, okay, double up on vitamin C or whatever you do, because you just feel generally discomfort, discomfort, I felt that. And by the way, I felt that every second of every day for 6 months. And that was one of the first things. And then incredible fatigue right away. I'm taking 2-3 naps a day. And then this weakness in my legs walking. And then cognitive issues and brain fog, as people talk about, trouble retrieving words. As it got worse, that was really awful, because obviously as you introduced what I do, I make my living with my mind. That's my work all day as a writer. I couldn't do any of that. At the worst, one of the worst moments I remember was opening my bank statement and staring at it for minutes, trying to remember what I'm supposed to do with it. I mean, it was that level of non-function, and that continued for a while. So now I went into sort of 5 weeks as a medical mystery, because every doctor, starting with my GP, who I think is an excellent doctor and still do, none of them had heard about anything like this happening. He had heard about, people having effects for a week or so, and he said, I guarantee you in a week, you had it on Thursday, a week from the following Monday, you're going to be fine. And then I wasn't. So then he started running tests. And the one thing from the vaccine that, of course, they thought maybe it was myocarditis, did an echocardiogram, ruled that out. He was sure this had nothing to do with the vaccine, and that it was just a coincidence of timing. Finally sent me to a pulmonologist out of some concern, just wanting to rule out that I had a blood clot in my lung or something terrible like that. Went to the pulmonologist. He ran a bunch of tests, comes back in the room and says, "You don't have any of those things that your doctor's concerned about, but you are sick." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, very matter of factly. And I should preface too by saying, was the head of pulmonology and intensive care at sort of the top hospital in our area. So my doctor sent me to him saying, if it does have anything to do with COVID, this is the guy you'd want to see because he's the one who would know. He looks at me very matter of factly and says, "It's vaccine induced long haul COVID." To which my reaction was, "That's a thing? Everyone's telling me that's not a thing." Right. And he says, "Yeah." He said, "I've seen 3 or 4 cases already." He said, "You're the first one I've seen get it from the booster, who did okay, got through the first 2 shots, but then had it come from the booster." And he said, "It's going to be a long time that you're sick." I mean, he was sort of he was more grave than I think. I was so relieved not to have a blood clot in my lung that I sort of figured this isn't going to be so bad. He said, "You're going to be sick for 6 to 12 months and maybe well more than that." He said, "I have patients with the
Ugh.
traditional long haul who are well past a year and getting desperate." He said, but you will get better slowly. He said, "There's nothing I can do for you for any of these symptoms except the shortness of breath." So I'd been getting chest pains and more difficult. That was the scariest part, right? Is that I was at the first week, it was like if I walked 20 yards, it felt like I'd sprinted 20 yards. Then it was like that just from sitting and having a conversation like this. Then it was just sitting watching TV, and it was getting worse and worse. And he said, "I can help you with that, but I'd have to hospitalize you. So, keep my number." And I didn't ask him any follow up on what that would mean. But then it was into the game of, okay, how much worse do I let this get before I'm an idiot not to go into the hospital? Which, of course, this was still enough in COVID times. Nobody wanted to be in a hospital who didn't need to be there. And he said, "Do whatever you can to avoid getting COVID on top of this." Right. And
Yep.
I think that's it for that. And then it was I know, prednisone. That was the first thing. So one of my other doctors, very smart, had said, "This sounds like whatever this is some sort of inflammatory response, and that maybe a course of prednisone would help." So he agreed it was worth a try. He said, "I don't expect it to help." For 2 weeks through the prednisone, it kept getting worse. And then a few days after the prednisone, fortunately, blessedly, that shortness of breath just lifted and has never come back. That's the one symptom that just went away clean, which may or may not have had to do with the prednisone. They weren't fine to say. So then, I saw different doctors. There were I was frustrated with that, I have to say. There were some who just rejected the notion that this was what it was, and when I would tell them the doctor's name, who, then they sort of softened on that a little bit. But, there was not, there was just, there just seemed like a general disbelief among friends. And then, and as you've sort of suggested a little bit or maybe you didn't, in the business we're in, it's sort of a political monoculture, and the good people all knew that you don't have a problem with the vaccines, that they're all perfectly good. And the only people who are raising issues with them are sort of suspect. So, I was kind of an inconvenient and dubious character in my illness, I think, except for people who were really very close to me. And I just sort of
Yep.
worked my way back on my own. I tried a number of different things. You suggested fluvoxamine, which I think helped you maybe early, and that didn't do
Help
anything.
me with long haul. Yeah.
A few things. The one, it wasn't until 8 or 10 months in that I tried a small dose of Ritalin every morning, and that made a huge difference with the cognitive. problems. But the rest, I just sort of built my own way back. I would do that when they told me it was safe to exercise as long as I don't push it. I would do that 5-minute shuffle to the corner and back. Then when that got comfortable enough, I'd add a second one a day, then a third one, and I'd add a minute to one or another of them and then started consolidating until I finally got to where I could walk a slow hour at a time. And then I started adding some strength work again. Then the bike was a killer. I did, because I should say too, I started finding online communities of people because I thought, the doctors don't seem to know anything out here. But um, Science magazine, a week after that diagnosis, exactly a week, came out with an article talking about this phenomenon, that some people were having long haul symptoms from the vaccine. And that was the first time where I saw, oh, here are a couple of researchers' names, here are, some vaccine injured people and groups to start following. And so that is a way that I sort of kept tabs on everything myself, and saw that there were a lot of different things that would work for some small number of people, but other people would say, I've tried that and that didn't do anything for me. uh, and I one thing that they often said, though, was that people sort of caused a relapse by over exercising. And so I was very careful. So when I started doing the stationary bike, literally I did 1 minute. And then I did the next day, did 1 minute. And then the next day upped it to 2 minutes. And I thought I was going to die. So I stayed at 2 minutes for like a week or two till I could do that. And then added to 3 minutes. And over the course of all of this, at 15 months, I got up to where I could do an hour on the bike too. So with all of my sort of slow self-designed recovery, and with the help of the Ritalin, I was able at about 8 months to start writing. I'd say at 11 or 12 months, I got to where I was describing myself as 80 to 90% recovered. But then I plateaued there for a
Mm-hmm.
few months. So that was a little frustrating. It was like the good news was I could have some semblance of my life as I was experiencing it in the before times, but I wasn't quite getting there, and I didn't know when or ever. And then at 15 months exactly, I had to have a very small, unrelated surgical procedure where they put me out, for 15 minutes with propofol. And that knocked me back to square one. So literally on
Mm.
Monday, I did 60 minutes on the stationary bike. Tuesday, I had the surgery. On Thursday, I could barely shuffle to the corner and back again.
Did you need
And
any
that,
kind of prep for that surgery? Could it have been the prep that somehow affected you? Because I don't understand how propofol would have done that.
no,
There was no prep or anything. Okay, well,
no,
there you go.
no. The other thing which did something like that in a much smaller version was at 6 months, I had half a glass of wine. And that felt the next day like I'd been knocked backwards about 2 months. And it took me about 3 weeks
So
to get back from
interesting.
that.
There's something about alcohol in this whole thing too. I noticed when I had long hauler, and I had a very strange pulling empty feeling, like I was something pulling me down. Did you have anything like that, like an empty feeling inside? It's a very odd feeling. Well, that was me. And the alcohol would make one glass of wine would make that go away, and 2 glasses of wine would destroy me, much like you're describing. Very weird. Very,
Yeah.
very weird. So, okay.
I will say,
and then you had a little setback, right?
yeah.
Also,
So that's what
more
I'm saying.
recent setback?
I had that. Well, that was the setback. It not really. That was 3 months
I
ago.
see.
Knocked me to square one. And again, like I say, this is the kind of thing where I really feel very fortunate that we have the kind of online community like Reddit. Let me throw this out there. The Reddit group called, I think it's called Vaccine Long Haulers, is quarantined. There's no reason this should be. If anyone's listening from Reddit, please take that out of quarantine. This is a real thing. You don't have to pretend like this was 2 years ago and people are so. But in that group, that's a great place where you can say, I just had this happen. Has anybody had any experience with this? And one of the people said yes, and directed me to some study that there are some people who've developed through this through long haul intolerances to alcohol and or caffeine and or anesthesia.
Isn't that interesting?
Fortunately, caffeine I'm okay
So,
with. Drinking a little iced
okay,
tea.
fortunately. Are you still on the Ritalin, or did you stop that too?
Yes, yes. And fortunately, that Ritalin made the cognitive setback much less. So that has only felt like
Yeah.
I got knocked back about 6 months instead of 15.
So interesting. And have you messed around with the dose of the Ritalin?
No, I don't. I don't love being on it, and I chose that
Yeah.
over Adderall because when I read a little bit, it goes into and out of your system quicker, and I thought this would be a little milder. And
Yeah.
I this makes you a little anxious too. I have to say, this has been
Sure.
anxiety,
Oh,
increased
for sure.
anxiety has been
Yeah.
an issue with
Of
this.
course. Of course. That's it's a stimulant. That's how that works. But then you add your caffeine in there, and you get a nice
No,
big
I
panic
mean,
attack. But
I don't mean that. I
go
don't mean
ahead.
the anxiety from the Ritalin. I mean the anxiety from the long haul. So
Oh,
that was my
interesting.
concern, was that I didn't really love adding stimulant on top of,
I
you
see.
know,
Got it. Got it.
yeah.
So here's what I want to do. I want to take a little break. Then I'm going to bring Dr. Yogendra in here to discuss your case like you're not here. And then he may have some follow-on questions for you. And we're going to get to take calls off of Twitter Spaces for everyone to interact on this topic. But before we go to break, how insane is it that this conversation has to be the least bit quarantined, to use the word? It's just insane to me.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. But like I say, I've gotten a little bit angry about all this too. Should we talk about that? You want to talk about that later, or
Tell me, no, tell me what you're angry
your
about,
show?
because
Well,
that'll get people
brief.
calling in.
Okay, good. So one thing I should say, there are very few physical manifestations of this you can measure. I have these
Yeah.
rings under my eyes. I saw a photo of myself a month before and a month after the vaccine, and I looked like I'd aged 5 years. This all went more white. The one thing in all of my blood work, and I've done extensive blood work, is that my antibodies, I always have them do an antibody test to see, if this, it's still off the charts. They measure it
Mm.
in, I think they measure it in units per milliliter, and they'll give you a number up
Mm-hmm.
to 2,500. But if it's over that, they just say over 2,500. After 15
Right.
months, I
Right.
was still there, which takes me back to that thing about, the messaging about if you're having a bad reaction, right? This is a good thing because it's your body creating antibodies. Well, if we didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
situation like we have where everybody had their foot on the gas the way they did for the vaccine, and this is, we'll get in a second to what I'm angry about, you go, maybe somebody would have said, hey, maybe a better messaging is if you had a bad reaction, before you get a booster, are you in an at-risk group? Or do you want to go get an antibody test to see if they're actually low and if you need more? Because I
Howard,
think I went in
of
and got the
course.
third
Of
dose and
course.
overdosed.
But physicians were not allowed to use their judgment or do their job. This is, of course, what I'm talking about. Is that I'm trying to analyze risk reward for every age group and every situation clinically with this thing that is not. Yeah, it's mostly effective and it's mostly safe, but not exclusively so. And my job is to get that risk reward right. And if you're not allowed to think it through, you're going to hurt people. And so, absolutely, I'm furious about this.
And that's on the physician side. On the just general public side, two things I want to point out. One that really started me down this path of wanting to go back and read more and read what was happening at the time was Matt Taibbi's discoveries in the Twitter files about this virality
Mm-hmm.
project, and the idea that the
Mm-hmm.
CDC and Stanford University came up with a group that would do all they could to tamp down any information on media or social media that might contribute to vaccine hesitancy, whether true or not. I saw that
Right.
as I'm sitting there sick with this relapse and my head starts exploding. Because I'll tell you one more thing, which
Yes.
is that if you go on the CDC website now and ask if the vaccine is safe, they tell you it's safe, that in rare cases, there are 4 side effects, so 4 serious things that can happen. It's the clotting thing that you had.
Mm-hmm.
It's the myocarditis. It's Guillain-Barré, and I think the 4th is anaphylaxis. And they don't mention what I got. I'm a year and a
Right.
half into being sick. I don't know what the hell. Having another surgery, having a colonoscopy is going to mean the trade-off is I can't walk again the next day. Not walk again ever, but that this has made my life much smaller. We don't know for sure that I know I'm going to get better, but as my doctors confirm when I ask, I said, do we know that I'll ever get all the way well? And we don't know that. And we know that it's already hampering some of my other medical, preventative care. that I normally would be doing.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
this would be,
And Howard, we need to
serious.
bring you over to this stream and our podcast, and because I've been interviewing all the people that they silenced, because they all had something to offer to help fill. Okay, good. To fill out fill out our understanding of what was going on here that none of us were allowed to bear witness to, or even even think about, let alone talk about. So it's a disgusting period of history. I mean, your writer brain kicked in and called it COVID times. I'm reminding of Love in the Time of Cholera. This is what, long hauler in the time of COVID or something. This is something for you to write about one day. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I'll come back.
So there's some positive will come out of this. But I will take a little break here, and when we come back, it'll be Dr. Yogendra and I, and then we'll bring Howard back in and your call. So stay with us. Be right back. A lot of you have been asking for more information about how to counter the adverse effects of the spike protein from COVID infections and the COVID vaccine. The spike protein is not your friend, let's just say that. So I'm glad we have the wellness company Spike Support Formula as a sponsor, especially since renowned internist and cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough, who's also chief scientific officer of the wellness company, is one of its champions. There's some very intriguing research around nattokinase, which might be a way to take on the spike protein. Listen to this.
So start, if you would, with talking about nattokinase, how you got to that, and where you see its application.
So with the viral infection or the vaccines, the spike protein stays within the body, and it's found in the heart, the brain, the vital organs, and it's causing problems. The Japanese have been using this for heart and vascular disease now for 20 years. It's safe. It is a form of a mild blood thinner, that it dissolves the spike protein nearly completely.
Spike Support Formula is the only product on the market containing nattokinase, dandelion root, and a host of other antioxidants, all showing promise in helping you protect yourself and your family. To order this unique, specially formulated supplement, go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is drdrew.com/TWC. Use code DREW at checkout for 10% off today. I recently discovered Paleo Valley. They have a line of products that align perfectly with a paleo dietary regimen. Goodbye to the limited rotation of eggs, burgers, and the standard fare. Hello to a wide variety of extraordinary products that are both healthful and delicious. Paleo Valley offers a spectacular range of options, including 100% grass-fed beef sticks. They're packed with nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, glutathione, CLA, and bioavailable protein. Plus, keto-friendly, make for a great protein-rich snack on the go. Paleo Valley's tasty beef sticks are not just 100% grass-fed, but also grass-finished, sourced from small domestic farms in the U.S. and flavored with real organic spices. They're also fermented, which means they contain natural probiotics that are great for gut health, and they taste amazing. Try them out by heading over to drdrew.com/paleovalley to get 15% off your first order today. Don't miss out on this opportunity to discover a brand that is perfect for your paleo lifestyle. President Trump recently issued a warning from his Mar-a-Lago home. Quote, "Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There are 3 reasons the central banks are dumping the U.S. dollar: inflation, deficit spending, and our insurmountable national debt. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood famine, wars, political and economic upheaval dating back to biblical times: gold. And you can own it in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k, maybe from a previous employer, into an IRA in gold. And the best part, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit. They'll hold your hand through the entire process. Think about this. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar have? Birch Gold has an A+ rating with Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. I do not give financial advice, and previous performance is no guarantee of future performance. Visit birchgold.com/Drew to get your free info kit on gold. That is birchgold.com/DREW. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm going to bring in Dr. Yogendra here. We're going to have a little conversation about what we just heard, our little case, and then we'll get to your calls. I see your hands up over there, so I will get to you guys. So, Dr. Yogendra, was that similar to what you've been hearing out there, both from the long haul side from the virus and from the vaccine?
Yeah, that's very common. I think what was very interesting that what Howard said was what's on the CDC website, sort of the common or expected reactions, the Guillain-Barré, the myocarditis,
Mm-hmm.
clotting. I
Mm-hmm.
forget what was the other one. I think there were four things. We're seeing, most of those patients that are going to experience that, they're more acute. They're going to end up in the emergency room, going to
Mm-hmm.
the doctor or the hospital, right? And
Yes.
and a lot of times they're going to be immediately treated. Why not? We are getting the patients that are 3 months post-vaccine, 6 months post-vaccine, 12 months. So we haven't seen any cases of myocarditis. So we've seen them, they had a previous episode post-vaccine induced myocarditis, but we're not treating the myocarditis. We're not treating the Guillain-Barré or any of these, the common, the vaccine side effects that are the
What's on the
expected ones. We're
website?
seeing
Yeah.
exactly. We're seeing exactly
Yeah, but
what Howard is
they
experiencing.
are not including reactions that ruin people's lives and are disabling. You know what's interesting? When I listened to Howard talk about both his initial reaction to the first couple of vaccines and then the more longer term thing, as somebody who also had long term COVID, a long haul kind of thing, I can relate very strongly to what he said about not being 100%. And so I still have a little bit of that. Like when I exercise vigorously, I kind of lose it in ways that I thought maybe I'm getting older or something. But I just very much like what Howard's talking about. Just a couple days ago, I experienced it. I went out and trained my ass off, able to do the training, next day destroyed. And that's not normal for me. That's kind of weird. And it's kind of been like that since I had long caller, like whatever it was, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. And so it makes me think that this endothelial inflammation causes a diffuse injury, almost like a subclinical diffuse injury to essentially everything, especially brain. And so brain takes a long time to heal, right? And so I'm wondering if that's a way to think about this, or am I off base here?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, our hypothesis has always been the endotheliolitis / vascular inflammation. What we found was the spike protein from both the post-COVID patients and the vaccine patients. The papers that were published previously by our group, headed by Dr. Patterson. By finding that we found them in the monocytes, and the monocytes act as almost like these Trojan horse or garbage truck that is able to cross the blood. It's known in the literature that specific type of monocyte crosses the blood-brain barrier and has this very strong affinity to blood vessels. So what we're finding is some patients having the spike proteins in the monocytes and or abnormal elevations of those vascular monocytes consistently
Mm.
in the post-COVID, the vaccine groups. And interestingly, we're seeing that now with, some of the, I guess this much more, it's a bigger question of what exactly is the pathogenesis behind both long COVID and post-vaccine. See, here we're talking about symptoms here, right? And
Yeah.
we all know
Yeah.
that symptoms don't necessarily, multiple etiologies and pathophysiological explanations can explain these same symptoms. And there's right now no quote unquote approved diagnostic test that someone can say, I have post COVID, I have post vaccine, I have ME/CFS. And I think that is that's the other piece of the puzzle here. And I think the much bigger issue here, and our group is working very closely with some top government officials. Obviously, I'm not privy to disclose who they are, but what we are hearing from Washington and in the government is that there is a big concern that because there is no quote unquote diagnostic test or approved diagnostic test for any of these syndromes or situations, that there's a deep concern about disability. So someone that has post-COVID or post-vaccine issues, to quote not verbatim, but to paraphrase a high-level government official, what they told us was any fat smoker in the United States that has COVID or received the vaccine can come out and start saying they have disability, and that's the major concern here. So hearing that was really an eye-opening, maybe why there's potentially, there's a hesitancy about exploring the vaccine issue. Really, even the long COVID stuff, we haven't really made a lot of progress. I mean, as a giant medical scientific community.
Yeah. So I am very sympathetic to the overutilization of disabilities of various type, nowhere more so than California where it's out of control. However, to draw the line here is disgusting and a bias. And frankly, it's a discriminatory. It's actively discriminatory. So somebody like my friend Howard can't even step up and go, hey, I can't write the way I used to. You're not allowed to say anything. That is disgusting. And the government document what they're saying because it might have historical significance one day. I mean, we're as Howard mentioned, we're finding out one thing after another about how I don't have a strong enough word for it. I'm using a word like biased and discriminatory because that's exactly what it is. But that's not even strong enough in my opinion. It's ignorant. It's an ignorance, and it's a willful ignorance, and it's an willful ignorance, which is the opposite of scientific. Science requires open-mindedness to objective truth. And this is willful ignorance, and it just disgusts me. And it's so much a part of what we've been going through for the last 3 years. Let's bring Howard back in, if you don't mind. Howard, I just want to give you a chance to follow on with what Dr. Yogendra said, and if you have any questions for him. And then, if not, or if so, either way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to calls here on our Twitter Spaces. And if any of us have a response to the caller, because there's multiple voices here and delays and things, I'll ask you just to kind of raise a finger if you want me to call on you. But Howard, any response to Dr. Yogendra's comments?
No, it was interesting to hear, but bring on the callers.
Okay, well, the callers are reacting, actually. This is, yeah, go ahead.
Drew, go ahead. I just want to mention, so just to follow up what you had said, and it's really what the first thing that Howard mentioned. He talked about his political affiliation. He then went on with a disclaimer that he's pro-vaccine. I can't remember ever when we're talking about medicine and science and we're just trying to have an open discussion that people start talking about and I mean, Howard, I completely get what you're saying, but I'm saying we're living this time.
Yeah, we understand it. I gave a disclaimer right after his. I gave a disclaimer right after his about my position, which is the insanity of what's going on right now.
I was speaking to a very close friend who's a well-known actor today a couple hours ago, and I told him what I was doing today, and he goes, "Oh, are you going to be public enemy number one?" That was the first question. All I did was I said I was coming on this show to talk about what happened. That was the words I said. I'm going on Dr. Drew's show to talk about what happened. Are you going to be public enemy number one?
Anybody that would judge Howard for sharing his clinical experience should check themselves. Really think about what you're doing. You're taking somebody that's had a reaction. I'm here saying it's probably uncommon or maybe rare, but I need to know the numbers so I can make that adjustment in my deployment of the vaccine. And by the way, Ram, I have not seen any of this sort of vaccine injury in anybody over the age, definitely not over the age of 75. Has that been your experience also?
I have to look at the cohort, but I would say so. It has similarities to the long COVID, the demographics. Yeah. Mostly, I would say between 20 and 60, skews more towards women than men, 70-30%, which is interestingly enough kind of also correlates with some of the documents that Pfizer's released in terms of some of the adverse events from their clinical trial. Kind of our numbers really line up with that. It affects more middle-aged women than men. But again, those numbers could be skewed because men typically don't like to talk about, when they have chronic illnesses. So I think maybe there's some bias in that too.
Lindsay, go ahead and unmute your mic there in the lower left-hand corner. Lindsay's a nurse. She has something to tell us. She was responding with 100% on some of the thing that we've all been saying here. So Lindsay, what's up?
Hey, Dr. Drew. Hey, Dr. Yo. I'm actually a patient of Dr. Bream, so he saved my life. I'm a vaccine-injured nurse. I've never had COVID. It activated 6 out of 14 of my cytokines and all 3 of my monocytes. So he's been nursing me back to health for a year now. He saved my life, and just grateful for what you guys are doing.
What specifically, Lindsay, was the treatment? Were you Maravirac also, or what kinds of things?
So I'm on Maravirac and atorvastatin, and I'm also on propranolol because I have POTS and dysautonomia. Okay. And I also see Dr. Corey, so I bridged the 2 treatments together. So I'm on ivermectin, low-dose naltrexone, bunch of vitamins, minerals, and supplements. So it's been interesting. I'm about 50 to 60% functional now. Whereas when I first saw Dr. Bream, I was about -5% over close to dead. And he's really brought me back, but I still have tremors. I still have POTS. I have mast cell activation syndrome and a whole list of other
Crazy.
things. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Lindsay, for sharing the story. And I should mention, Howard, Susan has already ordered nattokinase for you. She is a spike protein theorist, and so she's going to insist you get on that and see if that helps. So let's keep going with the callers. Anything you want to add to that, Ram?
No, we've got an amazing team. I'm glad that Lindsay, you're feeling better.
Good. Here's a physician. Let's get a physician up here to see if he has any concerns or any questions. It's Dr. Muir. Dr. Muir, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, fellow Amherst College grad. Good to talk to you.
Go now, Mammoths rather than Lord Jeffs.
Yeah.
And Howard is also Amherst grad. So,
so I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist here in New York City, and I actually did a whole podcast, which I'm turning into a book on the pandemic while it was happening. And one of my areas of interest is the overlap between autoimmune conditions and psychiatric conditions, and I have psoriatic arthritis. And I one of the things that we need to be able to say out loud is medical interventions have risks. They have different risks for different people. I had my ass kicked for 6 months after the vaccine, and I would still do it again because at least for me, with the data I had at the time, and I actually recorded the audio of me getting that shot and turned it into a podcast. And the months leading up to it, right? We were dealing with a terrifying situation, and we didn't have all the information. And one of the things we're doing all the time is weighing risks and benefits, and sometimes accepting risk. And for the recent work by Eric Topol on the neuroinflammatory effects of the spike protein, to me, call into question, how much risk are we exposing different cohorts to? And these are, of course, important questions to answer. And at the same time, we're always balancing risks and benefits. And we're always taking risks, and sometimes significant risks. And if we don't acknowledge that, and part of the problem with this whole thing, like I literally sourced 1 million masks for hospitals in the city of New York with dollars from philanthropic funding, and I had hospital administrators turn them down because they weren't stamped KN95. And I have that on tape. I have hospital administrators saying, we don't want the liability of having real masks made in the same factory. They don't have the stamp, so we're going to let our nurses on the front line and doctors get COVID and die because they don't have a stamp, and we don't want the liability. We'd rather have them cover their faces with things that we know are ineffective on their own, instead of letting them have something, officially provided. It was
or how about just giving them the option to make the judgment for themselves? God forbid that physician and nurse judgment be the way forward.
Yeah, and that's weighing, like in a pandemic, right? There are no emergencies because we need to have our health professionals stay alive. And that means that we're accepting risks for everyone. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. But let me interrupt you a second and just say, you bring up psoriatic arthritis and autoimmune disease and psychiatric pathology, and just read an article today about a woman with cerebritis from chronic lupus and got on some sort of cytotoxic agent or something and came back from a fugue state. She must have had a sort of a locked-in syndrome from the inflammation being at that level in the brain. I have this distinct feeling that a lot of the not all, but a lot of the long COVID and long vaccine injury is similar to head injuries, traumatic injury, like a global injury to the brain. This is a global vascular, I think. But do you agree with me that the inflammation is in the vascular system, but it's still inflammatory and it's global and it's across the brain?
And so I'm going to agree with that pretty strongly, and argue that that's actually probably more often the case with psychiatric conditions anyway than we recognize. So Chris Brown just wrote a book called Brain Energy, which is remarkable at the role of mitochondria across these illnesses. Ketogenic diet is a potent intervention for epilepsy. We've accepted that for 100 years. It is likely to also have a role in bipolar disorder. These are neuroinflammatory conditions until proven otherwise. And I use a lot of neuromodulation to treat that, but like these are part of our body, right? The inflammation affects
oh
the
my God.
et cetera. So of course.
We're just beginning to get to it. Listen, do me a favor, Susan, keep an eye out for this. Send an email to contact@drdrew.com, and I'm going to try to get you on a podcast to talk this in detail, okay?
Would love that. Contact@drdrew.com,
okay,
and thanks so much for having me on.
Yep. Okay, thanks. All right, buddy. Anybody want to ring in on anything yet? Anybody, you guys, thoughts?
Drew, I think Owen brings up a really good. Drew,
go ahead. I hear you.
So I think Owen brings up a couple of really good points. I want to just sort of highlight that everything is risk versus benefit, right? The problem is right now we don't have any epidemiological data. We don't know the prevalence of these, these post-COVID or post-vaccine issues. Even the numbers between long COVID, it's post-COVID, what is causing it? We don't really know what are the real true numbers. And I think that starts to, when you don't have numbers, then you start to have nefarious players here that want to, they take a small thing and they say, look, millions are going to die of this vaccine. Everyone's going to, what do they call it? The clot shot. And look, the vast majority of people they've done okay with the vaccine, with the COVID vaccine. I think that's very, very important in terms of the safety, at least these side effects. But there is clearly a certain group of patients that have had not just only like the common ones or the known ones, but the ones like Howard, and their voices are not being heard right now.
And Dr. Yogendra, the pushback, I agree 100%. And that's, again, why I continue to use it in the elderly patient. The pushback is, and I was going to bring this up with Dr. Muir too, because he emphasized the deadliness of the illness. The reality is that was overstated for young people, drastically, grotesquely overstated. And so on one hand, we're overstating the risk to people that are truly not at risk, and we're maybe understating the risk of the therapeutics and the vaccine to that same population. That's what I'm concerned about. I think, maybe this is why I stopped calling Howard. I would have definitely recommended he get the vaccine at the time he got the vaccine. And I would have felt terrible about the vaccine reaction. I would have been confused, because it was not really in the literature yet, that kind of thing at that time, though I've seen it quite a bit since. And so it is again, that the hysteria they caused around the illness, and remind ourselves, they continue it months and months into Omicron. Remember when Omicron showed up in South Africa, and they announced then that, here it comes, it's going to destroy the world, and don't listen to those South African doctors who keep saying that it's mild. That went on for months and months and months. And by the way, the vaccine that they were pushing extraordinarily hard at that time had little or no activity against Omicron. There was about a 6-month period of overlap there. I do think that it did interrupt Alpha and Delta, and Alpha and Delta were nasty, nasty illnesses. I don't want to understate that they weren't nasty illnesses, and they did kill a lot of people. But we overstated and made hysterical the risk to younger people, and that we're not allowed any conversation about the risks of the vaccine. I'm going to bring up Stacy before I let you guys respond to my little comments there. Stacy, just unmute yourself and have at it.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Drew. Thanks for having me on. Hi there. Thanks for having me on. I just had a point to make and then a question as well. Just a little bit about my history. I do have a master's degree in a health-related field. And my son has gotten 2 kidney transplants. So he's now 18 years old, and he's gotten all of his vaccines that were recommended. But as they were developing this new vaccine platform, I'm kind of a research geek, so I wanted to look into it and see which one would be safe for him, etc. because I like to be informed. And I began to be a little skeptical as I was researching them in 2020, in the fall of 2020, about the mRNA platform, because I know my way around a study. I mean, I don't have a doctorate, or I'm not a doctor, but I do have a master's degree, and, we learn how to read studies and do statistics and do all that. And what I was finding on the mRNA was, so I was getting concerned, and I wasn't seeing much by way of, answers to my concerns. And then in February of 2021, I happened, because it was on my radar, I was scanning, I was searching and things. So maybe that's why I saw it. But I did see a letter that was sent to the EU, the Emergency Medicines Agency President, Ursula von der Leyen. And this letter was from 12 scientists. One of them was Dr. Mike Yeadon. And this letter outlined concerns that they had based on research that had already been conducted and what they had already found out. So in other words, these 12 doctors were following the science, and they had an urgent letter saying, hey, all of these other studies about the mRNA and about the spike, about the damage to the endothelial and the uptake by the endothelial cells with the lipid nanoparticles, all of that had been studied, even by Moderna, in 2020 and 2019. And they were concerned with the results of those studies because they did not see anything that had been resolved. And they wanted to know, hey, we saw these concerns with this platform and this method of delivery and the spike protein in these areas. What can you show us how those have been resolved so that this vaccine is safe? And they did not receive a response. And so they went ahead and published their letter online. I don't know, did you ever see that letter, or did any of the doctors?
I didn't see that, but I've heard concerns like that, obviously, and there's also concerns about the batching of the mRNA vaccines, the concentrations of various things, and whether or not there's partial mRNA and protein particles and things. There's all kinds of concerns that have just kind of gone unaddressed, and it goes unaddressed under the general heading of millions of people have had this, everybody's fine. Yep, generally, as Dr. Yogendra said, generally true, but not specifically true. And trying to make a decision for 18 to 20-year-old male with multiple kidney transplants, that's a challenging decision to make. Some people may have no trouble with it. Many doctors might just go right with it. My thing is, what's wrong with Covaxin? Why haven't we approved Covaxin in this country? And maybe it's that it really isn't specific to the dual agent yet, the Omicron. But why aren't we allowing more traditional platforms? Dr. Yogendra, do you have any thoughts about that?
I would probably say politics, but that's usually, before COVID. I wouldn't say that. It seems like every sort of conspiracy theory or wild thoughts that people have after COVID seems to all be coming true. So I'd probably say there's something finances, or I couldn't tell you true about.
But there's no medical reason you wouldn't think they'd be giving a more traditional platform like Covaxin, which they had kind of approved at one point and then didn't approve. And maybe it's something to do with Omicron. I'm not sure. But again, let's at least aim towards, for these young males that really need vaccine therapies, that have concerns. I mean, why not have options?
Yeah. Well, he ended up getting it. We all ended it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Stacey. Finish up.
Oh, I was going to say, I ended up just letting, his kidney team at Stanford know that we really wanted to wait for the risk benefit analysis for his age group and his, solid organ transplant. They were okay with that, because the data wasn't really out yet.
Good.
And I was asking for data.
I call that progress.
We ended up,
progress.
All getting it. We all got COVID. We all got Delta. He sailed through it. He was sick. He had a fever for about an hour. And then he got the monoclonal antibodies. They had him on that. But now, we've all had it. We had it once back in October, 2022. So I just tell you, with all the pushback, and then I'll end with this, but with all the pushback that I saw, the things that were not making sense to me, a mom who's not a doctor, all the questions that I was not getting answered, and the hyper push to cover all of those concerns up. In other words, I heard the wording, it is suggested as that it is safe and effective. When I see things in studies, here's a concern, and at the end of the study they say, but we still recommend you get it because it's, the data suggests that it's safe and effective. Well, what data? There's no data in there that says it's safe. But I did put all the references to the studies and the letter in the comments to this space. So if you can go look at all the body of the letter and all of the studies that, again, all of the studies that had come out before any of the emergency use authorizations were issued. So why they didn't address any of those concerns and all of those things happened that they were concerned about makes me think that, hey, I wasn't a conspiracy theorist before all this, but now I'm a truther. I just want to know. So thank you so much.
All right,
Good
Stacey.
for you.
Thanks, Stacey. Susan is convinced that moms are going to lead us out to the truth.
Yes.
She keeps saying the moms have to make the women.
We have to use our instincts.
Yeah, it's crazy. Again, great comment. And let's see. Look on what's that?
On the conspiracy theory side, this was my first taste of this. Was I think I said 6 weeks after I got the shot, Science magazine had an article. And that was the first place that gave me some researchers to take a look at, to try to contact, see what was online. There's a group called Real Not Rare. Is this? Do you know? The vaccine injured.
I've heard of this. Yep.
And somewhere in this, the name React 19 came up. And I've heard them mentioned actually on one of your podcasts with Dr. Victory. Somebody mentioned them in passing. And so I typed React 19 into my Google search, and I got, React 19, REACT 19. And I get a message that says, there's no such website, but here are some others you might want to look at. And they're all pages from the CDC telling me how safe the vaccines were. And I go on Yahoo, tried the same thing happens. Later, I didn't join Real Not Rare because I'm not convinced this is not rare, right? And I didn't want to be part of overstating the commonness of this. But I did follow a lot of their links. Sure enough, they had a link to this React 19, which is just an organization of vaccine injured people like me who happen to be doctors and researchers and scientists. And we're just trying to find a place to pool information and such. And so this was the first time that I went, man, somebody's trying to cover our eyes on this. And then the second one that came up quickly in our life was my wife has a friend who got tinnitus as a result of the vaccine, which I guess is common enough that Cedars-Sinai here was doing a study on it. She was part of it. They had a Facebook group just of people who'd suffered tinnitus and comparing remedies, comparing workarounds, very benign. But anytime anybody would post with the word vaccine in it, Facebook would shut down the group. So they started talking in code. And it's like, I've never been a conspiracy theory guy. And all of a sudden this comes up. And I think that's why when I saw in the Matt Taibbi reporting that this wasn't just over-enthusiastic big tech companies trying to be good citizens, that this was actually programmatically encouraged by our health authorities. Isn't like the first rule in a pandemic or in any health crisis is be honest. When you encounter stuff like that, how does that make me somebody who has always been very trusting and believing in health authorities? Where does that put me for the next time around?
Gosh, I almost feel like I need to do an episode where I just sit and recap my feelings right now because I am so overwhelmed with various emotions when I hear you say that, because I've learned so many things I didn't know about what's happening in this profession and in public health, and there's a whole story to be told here that very much zeroes in on what you're talking about here, Ram.
Sure, I want to share something with you and the rest of your audience, and this is purely anecdotal. This is not someone that came in trying to work with us. I'm on vacation. I'm not going to say where because I want to keep this person completely anonymous. So I'm on vacation. I'm doing a food tasting tour, and a couple of guys in the military happen to be on this tour, 10 dudes. And we start talking, and ask my background, what I do. So, I do, anesthesia, and by trade, I'm doing some of this research on long COVID. And one of the guys pulls me aside and goes, "Hey, do you know anything about vaccine injuries?" So I get a little startled, because not really typically a conversation I have in public or with people in general. And I was a little bit puzzled, but he goes, "Well, I'm going to tell you my story." And so this is someone, he's one of the top air pilots in the Air Force, highly trained guy, young guy. And he tells me that he ended up getting, I think it was after the Pfizer vaccine, he ended up getting myocarditis. And for 18 months, 18 months now, since he has the vaccine, he's got injury, he's got scarring in his heart. He just got cleared to fly. But he was saying initially, when he got the vaccine, he started to experience chest pains. Went to his commanding officer, sent him over to the military hospital. They did all the tests, and they said, "Well, there's really nothing wrong with you." Sent him back. Now, he said he was flying and still having some chest pains. Said what he was doing, he was running on a tread. He said he did one of the things, in his exact words, is one of the stupidest things he did was try to plow through it. So he was running on a treadmill, running on a bike. He says one day he experiences a crushing chest pain. So he gets on a treadmill, trying to, it's the last thing you want to do if you have a chest pain, but runs on a treadmill, tries to fight it off, and realizes something bad's happening. Calls his commanding officer, says, I'll meet you in the military hospital." Gets over there, does a battery of tests, and they're like, "You've been having multiple heart attacks for the past 6 months." So he's been on I forget what medications he was on, but so he starts telling me about his story and how he finally just got cleared to fly, but he's got really bad scarring on his heart, and he's worried about when he leaves the military, about his disability. Then he starts telling me that there are others in his squadron who also experience this. And then he tells me that he goes on these military
I'm going to interrupt you. We did a whole podcast with a military doctor who documented extraordinary frequency amongst flyers with this, and was told to shut up. What was her name? Do you remember her name? Maybe somebody can help me on the restream. But no, it wasn't Sasha Latipova.
I'll look it up. I'll find it.
No, before that. She is a fine physician and had a whole sort of Air Force under her supervision, and started reporting this, and was told to shut up, and she's not shutting up. And so this is not an uncommon phenomenon, and we don't know how common or how uncommon or whatever. We just don't know, because we're not allowed to even look at it. In her study, it looked rather common. I'm watching you guys on the restream to see if you can tell
Dr.
me who that
Teresa
was.
Long.
Teresa Long, that's who it was. Yes, Dr. Teresa Long. Thank you. You might look her up, Ram, or maybe talk to her. She'll call you back and hear her story. It's hair raising. It's hair raising. So this is not something we have not heard.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, we're hearing it from a lot of the military, and it's scary because these guys are putting their lives to defend us, and if something's wrong with them, we need to be, there's a lot of money going. These are top pilots. There's millions of dollars going in.
That's right.
This one pilot, he said they put in $2-3 million invested in him, and they want him in top shape. So if we're having this issue, that's obviously very concerning.
I feel like we could spin on this for a while, and but I'm going to kind of wrap up. Are you want me to go on? What do you think? Okay, another call.
How does Howard feel? How are you feeling,
Howard? You hanging in? Your energy's good? You're feeling all right about this?
Me, I'm okay. I'm fine.
Okay.
There's a lot of callers
we're all
lined up.
getting really depressed, but we're getting really.
I'm sorry to do that.
We got a lot of calls.
We got to push through. No, it's important that we feel this together. We need to manifest a better change for this.
All right, so we'll kind of keep going here. I'm going to talk to Pablo. Interesting. I have a lot of women calling in, which is sort of interesting. That you said it's this thing tends to affect women more than men, and Susan's very concerned about moms being affected.
Yeah, the
by
moms
this.
are scared.
Yeah, and Naomi Wolf has done more to scare people a little bit about that. And again, I've seen I don't know what to make of the data right now. It's because and there is also, you guys, there's an adulteration of the medical literature, the editorial process. Annals of Internal Medicine, I'm telling you, they have broken the ice. They've started publishing stuff that is finally counter-narrative. It shocked me. It jumped out at me when I saw it. It was a change 2 weeks ago. Change. And we have RFK Jr., you're talking, I hate the word conspiracy theory, so but I don't know what's going on, but something's going on. And RFK Jr. thinks that it's corporate capture of government regulatory agencies. He also believes they've captured the medical literature, and he said his first thing he would do if he were ever elected president would be to call in the editors of the majors and say, "Look, I'm gonna prosecute under a RICO Act if you don't do something about your editorial process." How would you like? You want to talk?
No. I heard that. I heard your interview with him. That's all. I don't know what to make of all of that.
Smiling.
Totally.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, especially after me accusing him of not listening.
I'm glad you're doing this. It's a great service and comfort that you're doing this, I have to say. It's brave, too, because I know you're taking your hits for it.
All right, I'm trying to get Nate up here. Yeah, I feel like the French underground. I've said that since Susan first set this thing up. We're like in somebody's basement broadcasting, with the current information, getting around the, who was. I don't like to make those references even anymore. Nate, go right ahead, unmute your mic and hear what you have to say. Oh, that's not happening. All right, I'm going to take him back down. You guys got to stay with me. You got to respond quick. I can't see what the name is here. Eat fish. Eat, pray, fish.
Just really glad that the restream stayed up today.
Yes. We had all kinds of crazy stuff yesterday. Yes, what can we do for you? I don't know your name.
Eat, pray, fish?
Yeah, it's you.
I just wanted to say, and I'm looking at it from the legal standpoint, but on the censorship, I've never seen anything in my life so bad. And I was a hardcore Democrat, had to switch parties to start fighting. And it was so bizarre that I worked at Reed Elsevier at one point, and they own Science Direct, which is a top tier publication. And I posted an article from Science Direct that I actually had knowledge of who worked on it, what have you. I was banned for 30 days. And I actually went around and called. I had to go through Instagram, but I called and I said that I was I forget how I got through, but I got through somehow. Wait, my phone.
We got you. We hear you. We hear you. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
You're in and out a little bit, but we basically hear you. So keep going.
Okay, 1 second.
Oh, now you're out.
Okay, I'm sorry.
1 second.
Yeah, but I called.
Somebody was calling her. Got it. Okay.
I called Meta, and I got through to a person, and I just laid it on to them. I'm like, my father, fought in a war. He quit his minor league base, and I can't post about vitamin D. At the same time, Facebook was rampant with child pornography, and I'm not, whatever. It's in Delaware Chancery Court right now. The shareholders finally sued, but nothing. I reported on guns, which is a federal offense. Nothing. I reported on child porn, nothing. But I was banned for Science Direct, vitamin D for 30 days. I think that this is so beyond comprehensible that some people just can't even wrap their minds around it.
I'm one of those people, my dear. What is your name? What is your first name, if you don't mind, so I can?
Mary Lee's. Mary Lee's.
Mary Lee's. I'm one of those people, and I think Howard, maybe Ram is too. I can't. The whole 3 years I've been like, what is going on here? Just shaking my head constantly. And what
you question your sanity.
Well, if you told me that
question your
story 4
sanity.
years ago, if you told me that story, I would have gone, "Oh, come on, well, whatever." They probably had a reason. It was I would have just been very dismissive. I couldn't. It would no way would it have entered my consciousness as something that was being actively censored, and yet now I know it's grotesquely so, and why they did it, and I still don't know the full story yet. I still don't know the full story. I really don't. Was it all just hysteria? Was it all? Because I lived through the opioid epidemic and
Right.
was fighting that and the regulators and the VA and the state agencies and the Department of Mental Health. I was fighting it actively during the opioid epidemic, and I was censored and punished and one thing after another for 10 years for fighting against it. That experience, what they did then was line and verse what happened now. And I can only describe it as evangelism. You have scientists and physicians that become evangelical crusaders that believe they're wearing a white hat to save humanity. That's how doctors do evil. That's how we hurt people. It's the word. It's beware the physician with the white hat. That is how we do harm. I'm telling you, I lived through it. And once what they do is then they get under the skin of the regulators and all the tech companies, and they go in there and they evangelize. They create their own evangelical group within those organizations, and now it is on. It's a religion at that point, and it has to be fought accordingly.
Well, and one other thing I wanted to state is they did so many crazy things. I'm here in Ohio. I mean, I can't. They filled the skateboard parks with sand. They destroyed the seed
I was
supply.
in the great state of California where we filled the skateboard parks with sand. We soldered over. We what's it called? We have a welding out. We welded the basketball courts so you couldn't throw a basketball. The environment where we should have been spending our time outside of the beach or the parks were forbidden.
Exactly.
And by the way, think of the average citizen. You worry what happened to the Germans during World War II. It's like, think of the average citizen that became the police force that was arresting, and the poor lifeguards that were going out into the water to pull people out, to arrest them and fine them for daring to run afoul of the "Thus saith the Lord" from the public health community. Oh my God, we should never forget what happened here. It's beyond. Yes, there was a horrible pandemic. Yes, there were people dying. Yes, things needed to be done. But what we did was so excessive and so nonsensical and so outside of the basic principles of our government and who we are as a people and as scientists. We didn't do anything based on an objective reality, and that's how we became evangelists and did harm to people. So thanks, Marlies.
There was no
by the way, Drew, while calling
Go ahead, say that again.
While calling that the science.
Yeah, right.
Right?
That's right.
The thing that was
that's the
that's
science.
what's
And anything that ran afoul of that was disinformation, non-scientific, when in fact science is about the back and forth. That's what science is. It's about getting to the truth through the back and forth of trying to understand this infinitely complex thing we call human biology. Well, you guys, I'm actually running out of steam. I was telling Susan during the break. I said, I think I got what Howard has from I got it from the virus, a little long COVID. I'm not. Well, that's what I think to myself. Maybe I'm just old, but I'm like 95%. I run out of steam in ways I didn't used to. And
we did get a super chat, though. If you can, I don't know if you can answer this.
What was the question? I didn't see it.
From Diaphanic One.
Okay.
We got $4.99.
Okay.
Thank you. Any chance neuropathies from very high VEGF levels could be mistakenly diagnosed as MS? ? Also, what are your thoughts on the vax/MS paper out on WHO?
I was aware there's an MS paper. I think John Campbell did a podcast on it. I've not reviewed it yet. I'll refer this one to Dr. Yogendra. So what is the probability? You got to understand, MS usually shows up on MRI pretty clearly. And so, and if it doesn't show up on MRI, there's characteristic patterns in the cerebral spinal fluid. It's well beyond just neuropathic changes in the periphery and VEGF elevation. But Ron, what do you say to that?
No, I agree, Dr. Drew. We still can't disregard of principles of medicine and having to do a thorough history and physical and getting all of the diagnostic tests. I will say this one, along those lines on the post-vax, very interestingly, we're seeing quite a bit of patients that have post-COVID that are actually having a reactivation of Epstein-Barr, reactivation of Borrelia or Lyme, reactivation of Bartonella, Babesia, and we're seeing that with some of the vaccine patients too. They're coming in presenting as having a post-vaccine reaction. In the past, I think 3 months, we're picking up reactivation in the post-vaccine group of other pathogens that that they had no idea, but we can pick it up through our algorithm. So still quite a lot of work to do and to get an understanding of what's going on here.
Ram, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes with my friend Howard. We appreciate the update. Where do people go if they have long haul symptoms, if they're concerned? Where can they find you?
COVIDlonghaulers.com. You can get the testing and a consultation with our group. That's for long COVID, post-vaccine, Lyme, ME/CFS. We've got, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be making a couple of big announcements. A lot of all our data is actually sitting with the FDA right now. We should actually be hearing back from them in the next week or two. So keeping fingers crossed, and we'll make announcements.
Even though they are quietly censoring you from the editorial position, but I will just leave those thoughts to myself, I suppose. I just, as Ron told me something earlier, and I used the F word in a way that I don't usually use it, and I thought, this is so ridiculous, but here we are. So good luck with that, Ron. We'll see you again. Good. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts.
So good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks, Sue. Nice meeting you.
Okay.
Nice meeting you, Howard.
So,
you too.
And so, Howard, here we are. We've threatened to do this for a long time, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts. I don't like to be a hysteric in either direction. I like to try to be very measured about this, and I feel you kind of doing the same thing. And yet it's hard not to get kind of angry, given, as you said, the silencing, the Matt Taibbi reporting, and the way people are harming people, actively harming people for trying to get to the truth, and not helping people who have been harmed and would like some help. To me, that's sort of unconscionable, even if it's not on a large scale. Unfortunately, some of this is on a large scale. I wonder if you have any kind of last thoughts. I love your writerly approach to thinking about these things.
I guess the last thing I want to say, I was thinking about this. What's the title of this episode? Because that's what got me thinking. It was something about
I don't know. Caleb, what did you say? I don't get to title it. Caleb, what did you title it?
Trust the silence.
What he said. Oh,
and the rest
trust
of
the
it
silence.
Was something about the vaccine injured.
The vaccine injured tell their stories.
Yeah. So this may feel like it cuts a little in the opposite of my anger and of the other things that I said. And maybe this is that dose of calm and perspective that you and I both try and bring to this, which is for until very recently, I never thought of myself as injured, and I still don't talk about it that way. I think of this as getting sick. I think of this as an illness. I think of this as the world has gotten hit by this horrible pandemic. A lot of people have been hurt by it worse than I have, right? And that I was just one more person sort of swept along with this. And I think that's probably the bigger picture, that at the margins there are things which our authorities should have done better. And I don't feel like I was done well by them, and some specific doctors I don't feel I was done well by, because I think they got too swept up in the politics of all of it too. But this has hurt a lot of people, and I'm just kind of one of them. That's kind of the main thing I think when I think about it.
I have a question
if I can
for you, Howard.
If I can say something.
Oh, go ahead. No, you first.
Caleb, go first.
I think something that might have been missing a bit from this episode were the stories of families who actually lost people because of the vaccine. The person I was most afraid of coming up today, which didn't appear in the spaces, was Answers for Sean, who is the father of his 17-year-old son. He found his only son dead right after taking this vaccine. And every time he comes on this show and says anything, it's like, it feels like you're putting a knife through my heart, because I can't even imagine the pain that's in his voice. And I hear those stories over and over and over again. And that's what's really opened up my mind to, like, I was totally fine. My wife was totally fine. Almost everyone I know has been totally fine with these mRNA shots, but that still doesn't balance out the torture that some of these people are going through now, when a bunch of people just like me were saying, oh, it didn't hurt me. It didn't hurt me. That doesn't mean that it's not hurting other people in these very devastating ways.
Well, and if we could come up with some real numbers, like, okay, the probability of a Sean was 1 in 10 million or something. It's like, if that's true, we probably wouldn't. Every medical intervention has nasty potential. Just they all do, and some of them are catastrophic. A 1 in 10 million risk, okay. I mean, if it helps, a 1 in 1 million risk of a serious outcome from the illness. Right. Now the math is there. But if it's 1 in 10,000, right, then it's a whole different story.
I think the thing is that people were not told that math. We were just told safe and effective. We weren't told, well, even if they said 1 in every 500,000 are going to have these side effects, all of us would have felt they're at least being more honest with us. But now this way, it seems like these parents, they feel like they were totally lied to. They did what they were supposed to do, and now they've lost.
That's right. And Caleb, you're absolutely right. I'm looking at the Twitter space to see all those 100s coming up, what you just said. Yeah. And Howard said it a while ago. He said one of the first jobs of public health, in our humble opinion, is be honest. Give us the truth. Don't tell us to shelter in place and hide under the bed, and then lead us with a whole bunch of BS. Susan.
I also think, okay, so the whole accountability by the government, like, what about people who are disabled and they don't get any respect for that? For the fact their lives are ruined, they can't afford to work. Right. And I don't see Howard as being the kind of person that would want a disability check or something.
They're blaming the victim.
That's what the government's afraid of. That's what the government's afraid of.
They should be responsible for that.
And I get that's what they're afraid of. And yet they cannot be so willfully ignorant to what's going on here. So there's got to be.
I mean, if that's the reason why they're not sort of talking about it, is because they don't want to be accountable.
They don't want to pay. I don't know. I don't know. There's pieces missing still. Yeah, I know. It gives me the willies too. Yeah, I don't like to think that way. But I still think most people generally are well-meaning. They were trying to do the right thing. They just got swept up either in hysteria or evangelism, and that makes people do the wrong thing. And so there's still pieces missing. There's still stuff I need to know. And I've learned a lot by talking to all the silenced folks. I really have learned a ton. I still say the poster child is Jay Bhattacharya, who we should get back in here. It's been long enough that we should get him back. He is the poster child for a consummate professional, a teacher, a professor being
Stanford
grotesquely sidelined and harmed by the government and the government agents. And that's just... It's not okay. All right. Well, listen.
But at least now he's able to speak freely with it. He's back.
Freely. Like we're able to speak
we talked
freely
to him at the very beginning of the pandemic, and we were like, "What?" And then he just got silenced, and that was crazy.
And look, hear me and Howard saying we're going to be America's most hated. It's we're just having a conversation, and it scares us.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's just this weird world we live in. I mean, think about it. You imagine when we first started meeting there in Hollywood near CNN, even trying to imagine this moment? We couldn't have imagined it.
Not at all.
Right?
Not at all.
What would your dad say? What was your dad say? Bad enough that you studied English in college. What would he say about all this?
Right. I think about that all the time. Thanks for having me on, Drew.
Yeah. All right, man. Great to see you. Say hi to everybody for us, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Take care.
All right. And
God bless.
For the rest of you, great calls. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody on Twitter Spaces. You did a great job. Thank you for participating with us. Let's put up the upcoming shows.
No glitches today. Thank you, Caleb. We love you.
We have Tuesday. Let's see, today's Thursday, right? So Tuesday, there we are. Got Michelle Bachman and Brian O'Shea. Susan's very excited about this. June 7th.
And Brian O'Shea is Naomi Wolf's husband.
Correct.
So if anybody wants to
gets Susan,
know that
gets Susan as like a cat on the hot tin roof every time he comes in.
I want to get the both of them on too.
Asim Malhotra, cardiologist with Kelly Victory next Wednesday, and the following Wednesday, Tom Renz comes back with Kelly Victory, and he was the attorney who told us that he hinted that the EcoHealth Alliance may be a counter-espionage action, and that's why they funded the gain of function, which is an interesting thing. It's the only thing that makes sense for me. So I when things make sense, I sort of think they probably are so. So until then, we will see you at 3 o'clock Tuesday, Pacific time. See you then.
Ta-ta.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
But I wouldn't have Botox in the back of my neck because you have
well,
to.
Well, it can even cause, it can move around and cause paralyses elsewhere.
I would think you'd get it like in your forehead or whatever.
Sometimes you do that, sometimes.
Which I kind of need because I have really
Don't
tight
do that.
muscles.
That's not.
I've never gotten Botox here ever.
Really? You could have fooled me. I think I paid for it.
It was free. Come on.